Shabbat Shalom.
We are getting closer and closer to the High Holy Days, with the start of Rosh Hashanah less than 2 weeks away. And if hearing that just stressed you out, it made you start thinking about getting tickets for services or preparing meals or bracing yourselves for family dynamics during services and meals, it is okay. We are all in this together, and you have a little less than 2 weeks to get there. There is a famous book that is read by many people, including members of this community, by Rabbi Alan Liu, and the title feels very appropriate. This is real, and you are completely unprepared. And we're going to be unprepared together, and that's okay. That's okay. And so as we get closer to the High Holy Days and prepare for Rosh Hashanah, and then Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, and then Simchat Torah, our Torah portion this week, Ki Tavo, it takes us back to words famously found in our Passover Haggadah that we recite each year. My father was a wandering Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and sojourned there. But there he became a great and very populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us, oppressed us, and they imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried to Adonai, the God of our ancestors, and Adonai heard our plea and saw our plight, our misery, and our oppression. Adonai freed us from Egypt by a mighty hand, an outstretched arm, and awesome power, and by signs and wonders bringing us to this place and giving us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. God instructs the Israelites in our portion this week to say this passage upon first reaching the Promised Land, a kind of homage to their history and to God's deliverance of them from Egypt. After reciting this, our ancestors were to enjoy a meal of the first fruits, the first of the harvest of the land. They were to share this meal alongside the Levites, as well as specifically with the stranger in their midst. And then we are also reminded that we are to tithe, give 10% of our yield to the Levites so they can do their priestly jobs, the stranger, the orphan, and the widow. So here we are. Our people are on the precipice of entering the Promised Land after centuries of oppression in Egypt and after 40 long years in the desert, and we are commanded, once again, to remember that we were once strangers. We were the ones without power, without agency, without the ability to truly give ourselves the gift of safety and security. We were the ones that Pharaoh and the Egyptians looked upon with disdain and suspicion, believing that we had something to hide, that we might rise up against them. We were the strangers. And because of that, we now have an obligation to look out for the strangers who will inevitably be in our community. The commandment to protect the stranger is mentioned more than any other commandment in our Torah for a total of 36 times. So perhaps then it makes sense that in this moment, as Moses prepares the Israelites to cross over into the Promised Land, that they would be reminded of this holy task. That in the moment of moving from powerless to powerful, we must be reminded of our own story. Nachmanides, our commentator from the 13th century, makes this connection explicit. You know that every stranger is disheartened and sighs and cries out with eyes directed toward God. And God will have mercy on the stranger just as God had mercy on you. As it is written, the Israelites were groaning under the bondage and cried out, and their cry for help from the bondage rose up to God. That is to say, it is not because of their merit that God helped the Israelites, but only because God had mercy on them from the bondage. In addition to this explanation, Nachmanides also adds some emotion to the situation of the stranger. You know that every stranger is disheartened and sighs and cries out. And unfortunately, tragically, strangers in this land, the Haitian immigrants of Springfield, Ohio, have been disheartened, and they are sighing, and they are crying out. Like many of you, I had not heard of the town of Springfield, Ohio until 10 days ago at the presidential debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Repeating an entirely made-up, debunked, and false story, Trump claimed that the Haitian immigrants of the town were eating the dogs and cats of their non-immigrant neighbors. Again, an entirely false story. And yet, these rumors are dangerous. Since these rumors began circulating last month and then they were elevated by Trump during the debate, Springfield, Ohio has experienced the following. A neo-Nazi group, Blood Tribe, held a public march through the town bearing swastikas and telling Haitians to go back to Africa. At least 33 bomb threats have been called into various institutions, including City Hall, and these threats have led to school closures and daily police sweeps of schools. Nearby Wittenberg University canceled all school activities and moved classes online after receiving a threat of a potential shooting targeting the Haitian community. The town canceled its annual Downtown Culture Fest, a celebration of the diversity that exists in Springfield. Jethro John, a Haitian pastor in Springfield, said that his congregants were scared to come to church because of these threats of violence. Kids scared to go to school, parents scared to send their kids to school, the work of city government disrupted, violent neo-Nazis marching through the streets, events to promote diversity canceled, congregants too upset, too scared to go to church. In an interview with NPR, Vieles Dorensaville, the leader of the Haitian Community Help and Support Center, plainly stated about the Haitian community, "We are asking ourselves whether to stay here or go somewhere else." Making that decision to stay in a community or to flee because of the threats of violence is a decision familiar to our community. Perhaps your own family members had to make that kind of decision. Maybe you yourself have thought that. It is a dreadful, terrible decision to have to consider. And we should be absolutely clear about this. This rumor, this false but dangerous rumor, is akin to blood libel. The lie started in medieval Europe that Jews were kidnapping and slaughtering Christian children and using their blood to make matzah for Passover. Several journalists, including Jamel Bowie and Lydia Polgreen at the New York Times and Zach Beecham at Vox, have noted this connection between this rumor from Springfield and blood libel. As Beecham explains, the blood libel, which persisted throughout the Nazi era, was designed explicitly to cast Jews beyond the pale of acceptable society, to link Judaism as a religion and an identity to barbarism and brutality. It was, as Bowie notes, frequently employed to whip up violence against the Jewish community. It is clear that among all of the remixes and dances and memes made to poke fun at Trump for circulating this outrageous rumor, it is clear that this modern-day blood libel has real consequences, painful consequences for the Haitian community of Springfield and beyond. Looking back to our Torah and looking at our own history, the only way to confront these lies and mistreatment of immigrants is to do what we wish others would have done for us in the past. If only other medieval communities in Norwich, England, or Blois, France, would have pushed back against these lies. If only other communities throughout Europe during the 19th and 20th centuries had done more to stand in solidarity with us. As Rabbi Ruvain Firestone notes in his commentary on this week's Parsha, we live today in a world of many nations that treat their strangers as the ancient Egyptians treated our ancestors in Egypt. In rare occasions, oppression is relieved by the direct and miraculous power of the Creator. But more often, oppression is relieved in other ways, through the grace of God's likeness in the faces of helping neighbors or helping strangers. As Jews who know the suffering of the oppressed, we are especially obligated to reach out to the strangers in our midst, and we are equally obligated not to ignore the cry of the oppressed elsewhere, but to welcome those who flee the horrors of tyranny and oppression, Firestone writes. We don't have to wait for God to support the strangers in our midst. Whether those strangers are the Haitian immigrants of Springfield or our new neighbors right here in Brooklyn. Every Sunday afternoon for the last year and a half, CBE has been providing meals, snacks, and clothing to our new neighbors who are staying in shelters right here in Brooklyn. We will continue that work of supporting the strangers in our midst, our new neighbors, and you can be a part of it. I invite you to join in this work, and information can be found online or in our weekly email. This work that our Torah makes so very clear in our Parsha this week. My father was a wandering Aramean. We were the strangers. Let us never forget that. And may no one, regardless of their history or their background, have to wander alone or be a stranger in this world. Shabbat Shalom.